Nobody accused me of being smart. Well, thank you everybody for having me. It's an honor to be here to speak at NoleCon. That's a very warm welcome, a little too generous. I often say if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Most of the amazing things that come out of the company are done by the team, obviously. And we have a merry band of pirates that are very, very smart, as you can probably see by our research. So today we're going to talk about hardware. I think we all know that the software world, we've made great strides in helping secure the software layer, which brings us to kind of the next the area where attacks, as the threshold of effort increases. It's trying to get remote footholds within the software layer. People start looking lower and lower in the stack to identify new areas of weakness. So just a quick show of hands. How many here in the room have looked at like a lab, seen a fib or a sim, done any fib edits? Got one person. How many people here in the software industry, software security industry? Okay, great. So we'll couch the presentation from a software engineer's point of view into the hardware world, which is great. Because you can't divorce one from the other. Software relies on hardware, hardware relies on software. Okay, so moving on. So this is a boy band that I used to be in. Actually, this is my hacking group that we started in Seattle. This is a crew of people went down to DEF CON and won Capture the Flag for 3 years in a row, as previously mentioned. And then Jeff Moss asked us to retire to allow other people to win because it was getting a bit boring seeing the same team show up year over year and win the contest. So we kind of all sat around after we were asked to move on and looked at each other and thought, well, what are we going to do now? And so we decided to design the game. So when we were playing the game, it was the score was kept on literally paper and markers on the wall. So it'd be like team red, green, blue. And if you scored a point against team red, Miles would go over to the butcher paper and put 1 point for team X. And so we thought we could improve that. And so what you see today when you go to DEF CON, the video, the overheads, the automated scoreboards, the servers, etc., we actually designed the initial version of that. So that's kind of a bit of our legacy you can see hanging on the walls. But they've taken it so much farther than where we left it. So it's really cool to see. I got my start in the industry just because I'm passionate about security. I would be doing this whether I got paid to do it or not. Just like a lot of people that work in the company, the reason that we release interesting research is because this is what our guys do. They go home or on the weekends, they're looking at hoverboards, they're poking at robots, they're looking at new IoT devices to see how they can establish any kind of like footholds within that ecosystem and publish research. And yeah, moving on. So I founded IOActive in 1998. That was before electricity. It's grown into a global consultancy. Obviously, our kind of a research-first style organization. And the idea is that just like Ralph Nader, you probably haven't heard of him. He's kind of a U.S. guy. His idea was to make sure that companies exist, but when they're releasing products into the world, that they're doing so in a kind of responsible manner. So we kind of look at ourselves in a way, helping that thin blue line of helping the community stay protected from some of these unneeded, unnecessary threats that you probably have seen in the digital space. But saying that, there's too much work. As you can see, that technology is increasing more and more rapidly. Moore's law is almost, there needs to be a new law. There's not one day I wake up that I don't see technology that's occupied a new space in our life, and that's going to take millions and millions and millions of security practitioners working day and night to ensure that security posture of those products and services are actually secure. Because as you know, time to market often limits the security voice at the table. The products are released, security is an afterthought, and then we have to read about it on bug track, etc. So the more you guys get involved and excited about this industry, the better off my niece and my nephew will be. Okay, here's our history of our research. I'm not quite sure how we come about the things that we go into. I think it's just curiosity that really leads our research body. So you might have seen the GPAC that came out last year. That was basically the first remote, purely remote takeover of a vehicle through its comm systems and cellular link. And that was basically kind of a quick case in point where you can understand that just connecting devices to the internet or cellular networks, etc., as a feature are cool, like call home or get your new Google updates, etc., might not be such a great idea without doing the appropriate threat models, pen testing, fuzz testing, etc., on the product line. That car was actually taken over completely. The CAN bus was compromised, and the car was driven off the freeway into a ditch at low speed, thankfully. But who knows what that Wired reporter was thinking to agree to that demo. I wouldn't have done it. He had a semi-truck coming behind him when the car drove off the road. He must not have had a, I don't know, thrill seeker. And then you might have seen, we also, Barnaby Jack, bless him, we did some research on ATMs. Everybody kind of looked at ATMs and we're like, well, do those things are they really that secure? It's kind of a house of cards. Well, Barnaby was inspired by the Terminator movie where the kid goes up to the ATM and hacks it and gets cash out. And who doesn't like an ATM that's spitting out cash? So Barnes took it upon himself to go ahead and reverse engineer a couple different ATMs and see what he could do. But some of the best stories were him ordering those ATMs to his apartment and having to discuss with the service engineer about how that was why he was actually having ATM shipped to his apartment in San Jose. And he would tell the service engineer who had to take the ATMs up 3 flights of stairs, and they're quite heavy, that he's like, well, mate, it just saves me another trip around the corner to get cash on my way to the pub. And the guy actually believed him because it's Barnes and he's incredibly charming. That's a fun one. Miss that guy. And then we had smart meters, another example of too quick to market, throwing caution to the wind. We saw these devices being bolted to the side of people's homes, being talked about, rollouts of 34 million smart meters will be rolled out across the UK in the next 5 to 10 years. And we're like, well, who's actually audited those things? Anybody? And so we took it upon ourselves to look at them. And lo and behold, we figured out it had an attack surface that's actually warmable. So you could get remote code execution on 1 meter, and it would propagate to the next, and the next, and the next. And then you could possibly create a load shed that would cause either black or a brownout throughout the power grid. I don't know about you, but I don't want anybody in, not to name any countries, but a foreign country playing Tetris with my city or my country. And I've talked to some hackers, and that's their number one goal is to play Tetris from space. So I don't know. And then, you've seen the Italian job where they actually took over the city lights, street lights, and were able to compromise and say, okay, all streets going northbound on Fifth Avenue go green, and everything else go red. We were able to demonstrate that as well. Smart meters or smart cities enabling traffic meters to be connected to the internet. So you can kind of see there's this reoccurring theme that technology, as we know, that's early in its development, gets released into the public and kind of needs to have an extra set of eyes on it. And today's kind of like that challenge goes out to you guys. If you see something come out, fire up IDA Pro, go grab some fuzz testing frameworks and go nuts on it, because it's really nobody else is doing it. It's kind of just us. We probably saw some of our research too. We just hacked a robot. So, everybody's talking about we're going to be replaced by robots. I don't want to be attacked by a robot. I don't know about you. Okay, so more tech, more threat. Getting into the hardware bit of this presentation. And stop me anytime if I'm boring you or if you got any questions. So I don't know if you remember in 2003 there was a backdoor put into the Linux kernel tree or source tree. And that backdoor is really clever. It basically, as you can see down here at the very bottom of the slide, it's doing a check. Any kind of program that called the wait function would go ahead and check some environment variables and then reassign the user ID to root. And instead of this being a comparison operator, it was a get operator. So this would give any program that called wait for root access on the system. It's a 1-character difference. And I don't know about you, but if you looked at the Linux source tree, it's huge. And to find stuff like this would be quite daunting. the trilogy of backdoors here. So if this can happen in the software world, what makes it not possible to happen in the hardware world? Well, just last year, the University of Michigan released a paper on just that very subject, and they found out that if a insider, basically, of a chip foundry went ahead and added one more cell to the mask, and the mask is basically the blueprint for the chip, that they could go ahead and add this backdoor, and this backdoor would be just as subtle as that Linux backdoor was. It's hard to detect. It's one extra cell in a million gates, and basically the way it would work is that you would visit a web page, or God forbid you downloaded that exe that somebody sent you in email, and it would run some programs that would purposely and passively charge that cell. And at a certain point it would tip over and trigger a function within the chip that would put the chip into basically system mode or ring 0, letting anything on that chip now run as root. I don't know about you, but that's kind of creepy. And I don't know anybody right now that their job is exclusively to check masks before it goes to production. I do know large software companies employ teams of former intelligent community, like GCHQ, NSA types, of people to work in the private sector to do nothing but monitor their employee workforce for these kind of insiders, because there are quite a few, to be honest, of people working for foreign governments and technology companies that do nothing but insert backdoors or copy code out or give information about newly discovered vulnerabilities that haven't been made public to offensive security teams. And when you think about, say, for example, China always gets picked on, but we'll just use them as an example. If you think about these countries that have gone ahead and allocated entire cities and communities of apartment buildings to nothing but hackers. They go, you want a free place to live, you want a computer, you want an internet connection, go ahead and sit in that apartment, and as long as you are finding vulnerabilities and giving us remote access to new computers, like we'll just say 5 a week, you can go ahead and keep your apartment. And these are like thousands and thousands and thousands of people. The Tau team in the NSA is supposed to be roughly about 1,200 teams, 6 people deep. That's a lot of eyes and ears on nothing but offensive security in our world. So we definitely have our work cut out for us. Go back to the abacus. Okay, any questions so far? No. Okay, so when you're helping your clients or your company kind of consider these threats, you might want to ask yourself, who's in your supply chain? Where did that computer come from? What third parties are developing your code? What's their internal policy for vetting people working on that code? If it's sensitive code, obviously you want to maybe go back and watch the Citizen4 documentary to understand exactly that this is not the topic of the tinfoil hat crowd anymore. This is real stuff. Your adversary is well funded and they're determined and they've been at it for a long time. And it's up to us to make sure that we're doing our part and being professional and ensuring that we've done everything we possibly can to make it hard for the adversary to compromise whatever we're up to. I don't want my car being driven off the road because I said the wrong thing at a conference, for example. And recently, we've made the NSA's 18th most interesting companies to go after, and that was leaked in the Snowden documents. And I'm 18. I'm like, come on, can we done like 5 or something? But no, we're 18. That's too much, anyways. So I always terrorize our IT guys. I'm always like, are you sure you did that right? You know where we're at on the list, right? Don't sleep. It's great. It's good fun. Okay, and talking about supply chain security. So in 2005 there was the Five Eyes, which are a few the big Canada, Australia, the UK, the US, and a couple others that actually sent a memo around internally that said no more purchase of Lenovo products. Basically, one of the agencies had found that there were confirmed hardware and firmware backdoors in the product itself, and that these would not be deployed anywhere in the classified networks of these entities. That's pretty scary stuff, because I don't know about you, but I never got that memo until much later. It's way too late. So you can see the supply chain and chip security and firmware security are a real thing. And right now, I don't really believe we have a wholesale set of tools that allows us to, talk to a chip and go, where have you been lately? Can we go ahead and scan the registers and whatnot to make sure that it's not been compromised by a foreign entity? Sure, we have IDS, we have ASLR, we have DEP, we have all these tools for the software world, but not necessarily for the chip world. It's gotten so bad that post-Snowden revelations at Cisco, if you were, say, large tech company, fill in the blank, we'll say Amazon, and you order a bunch of Cisco kit, Cisco's now made it a point of shipping the hardware that you've ordered for your large publicly traded organization to a dead drop zone, a place that doesn't have anything to do with your corporate headquarters, and then you come pick that up. So you'll find all your server equipment, your router switches sitting in an empty office building somewhere that you have to send some guy with a truck and a cart to go pick up, put into the vehicle and take to your data center, because the NSA basically picks up where products are being shipped, and the minute it goes into a watch list and says, oh, look, that's going off to Apple's data center, that's going off to this data center, they go ahead and intercept it, open the boxes, put their own firmware on, and then actually they have the OEM tape it back with the Dell tape or the Cisco tape. You can't even tell it's been opened, and they can do this within, like, I think their turnaround hours, turnaround time's 3 hours. That's crazy. So there's a reason to be concerned. And again, this is all this isn't conspiracy theory. It's all documented, and you can take a look at it. And I think that's why BT, which is a big telecom provider in the UK, went ahead and they bought Huawei kit, and they did nothing for the first 3 years, I think maybe 6, reverse engineer it, pen test it, reverse engineer it some more, because I think they just felt that everything was compromised anyway, so might as well buy the kit that's cheaper and put the security investment on it. So the money they saved, they just hired a bunch of security teams to do nothing, pen test the hell out of it, and then rolled it out across the entire country. So they did a forklift upgrade on their telecoms. Interesting new approaches to life, I guess, post-Snowden. So we've talked a little bit about what the problem is, the way I see it. And I guess the idea too is understand the attackers and their wherewithal. So this classic threat taxonomy, you got the outsider, person looking in, could be a hobbyist or somebody a little bit more clever, knowledgeable insider, think maybe like a Snowden-like person, but with hardware skills. And then class 3 organizations, that's the one I'm a little bit, keeps me up at night. Goodness knows their agenda. I mean, we have foreign governments right now interfering with elections, which I think is super funny, because the first time I heard that, I'm like, that's bad. And then I found out that that's been going on for a long, long time. So it's not just Russia invented the ability to influence elections remotely. All right, case studies. So on the next couple of slides, instead of looking for the geopolitical references about why things are bad, this is more profiteering. So a lot of this chip hacking industry became more public when it came into the satellite TV, pay TV. Carson Knoll knows a lot about. Basically, there was a company called News Corp that spun up another company called NDS, and NDS's job was to ensure that its satellite TV broadcasts were secure and that its competitors were not. And it's pretty amazing. If you have a little bit of time, I'd recommend reading a book called Murdoch's Pirates, because you can actually see how people use technology to actively undermine the interests of their competitors, to the point of they actually put a company called On Digital out of business in 2002 because of the what they were up to. So every time On Digital would release a patch for their smart card, basically, NDS would pay a group of hackers to hack it again and release the exploit on a website called THOIC, which is the House of Ill Compute, that NDS also funded, which was Murdoch's money. So it's kind of like, say, Apple is giving, not bad example. It's basically like you're you're pretending you're normal and you're upstanding citizen, but in the meantime, you're completely stealing the engine out of your competitor's car. You know, they get up in the morning and go to work, and they can't get there because the car engine's gone. So it's a little underhanded. And eventually, NDS was sued along with News Corp, and they settled out of court, of course. And I think NDS ended up paying $1,500 total to EchoStar, one of the companies that was suing. And then Canal Plus, basically they worked a deal where News Corp ended up buying one of their failing companies in Italy. But the gravity of this situation is that the hardware security actually caused a large company, a company that was first to market in the satellite TV space, to go out of business. And I think that's something to really think about. It could have been mismanagement, but it certainly doesn't help when your subscriber base doesn't pay. Oh, our favorite here, Nintendo versus Atari. So Atari kind of crashed and burned in the 80s. They had one bad game. They had a few bad games. They didn't control the quality of the games that were going onto the console, so people kind of got a little disenfranchised with the product. So they had a hard time. Then they saw Nintendo enter the market space, and Nintendo did a great job because they had this chip, a kick, which is basically just a fancy word for DRM technology that only allowed games that were approved by them to enter into their walled garden, basically. Well, Atari wanted in on that action, and so instead of reverse engineering the chip like NDS did, they went ahead and spoke to the patent office because they were curious about whether or not there was patent infringements or whatnot. And the patent office inadvertently, or maybe, I'm not sure, maybe they did it on purpose, they gave Atari the actual methodology and maybe even code to the way that Nintendo had implemented this kick chip. Now keep in mind the kick chip had withstood 20 years of reverse engineering and nobody could get around it. Other than they actually, some people did get around it, and the way they got around it is they stunned it. I think it was 27 volts or something. That stunned the chip on boot, knock it offline while their third-party game loaded. That's really interesting. But anyways, long story short, they created the chip so they could enter into this market. So another example of people hacking at the hardware layer to enable profit. Not sure why they didn't just license Nintendo stuff, but they got sued as well. U.S. Patent Office super wasn't happy with what they did, obviously, and the rest is history. So you can kind of see we've got some spooky cloak and dagger stuff, and then we have the classic profiteering at play as far as the threat actors in the hardware space. So quick overview of state of embedded security. So we figured out software security, a bit. We're much better than we used to be. ALF1's paper from 2006 isn't as applicable as it once was. But now here comes IoT, and IoT is just a nice fancy word for embedded systems with either embedded Linux or RTOS systems, QNX, etc. And a lot of those systems don't have the checks that their larger counterparts do. So now your buffer overflows start to work again, which is exciting for people who have gotten bored lately. And the sheer size of IoT is impressive. So in 2020, they quote that 60 billion IoT devices will be on the internet functioning, and we just saw a botnet able to generate 620 gigabits of traffic in one situation against Brian Krebs. Does anybody know why Brian Krebs keeps getting attacked? I know, but he's got to feel important, right? You're like, wow, I'm really loved. The last attack, somebody sent him a magazine with heroin taped to the back of it and then called the police on him to try to get him busted for heroin. That's insane. And he's just reporting on the hacking community. Anyways, fine, choose your friends. So that's a big deal. Everybody, before IoT came out, everybody was warning against this. Like, you guys can go do your IoT. You can make your refrigerator IP connected. You can put a stack on your coffee maker and your kid's Barbie doll, but it will come back to burn you. And the security community was like we always do, pitchforks and swords. And hey, don't forget to do security. Well, they didn't do it. And here we are with this colossal mess on our hands. Again, we're back to it's up to us to stem the tide and get the research and get the guidance and help people down the Socratic path of doing security right the first time. To release a product from a software perspective into the market that hasn't been security tested, each vulnerability on average costs the company about $2 million to respond to through instant handling, patch updates, PR, etc. So when you're talking to these hardware people, maybe just let them know that we're trying to save you money too. So you saw some of the smart cities things we've hacked the traffic system. They want to basically make cities completely connected, and that means a lot of IoT. So if your city is thinking about this soon to roll it out, or if they have already, say you live in Denver, Colorado, where the mayor can actually pull up a smartphone app and dim the lights of the city from her phone, I would suggest trying to talk to them sooner rather than later. We're not going to run out of work anytime soon. Okay. So now we're going to get into stuff maybe you're all, just so we all know, I am not a hardware hacker. I'm not a fib engineer. I'm none of this. If you want those conversations, find somebody else. I'm just here to present a story. All right, so here's our lab. We have two hardware labs. One's in Seattle and the other one's in Madrid. The reason that we built these labs, as you can kind of guess by now, is that there's an overwhelming need to do hardware security. In the Seattle lab, we have what we call a scanning electron microscope. We have a FIB, focus ion beam laser, confocal equipment, a full chemical room, probing stations, and a garage specifically equipped for automotive research. And then the Madrid lab, a bit similar, but has a specific department for embedded IoT systems and to do tamper resistance testing. So here's some one of the things that, you know, from the world is the root of trust. These microchips that are end up being TPMs. They end up authenticating your handset to the network, making sure that you're paid your satellite bill, DRM, identify you to borders, make sure your print cartridge is actually legit, and your auto parts were bought from the auto part manufacturer that wanted you to only buy their OEM parts. So the interesting thing that I've learned over the past years is that, again, just like Atari, a lot of the companies are like, they want to offer a third-party print cartridge, so they'll go off to one of these black hat. I don't know if you'd call it black or gray. It's kind of up in the air about what the legality of all is, but they'll go off to one of these organizations and they'll give them the product and they say, look, I want to be able to offer printer cartridges for that printer, and then the team will go ahead and use their FIB, their SIM, to break down the chip and understand how it works, reverse the protocol, and then hand it back to the client, who then goes off and makes a third-party product. So there's a lot of that in this hardware hacking industry. Not so much on the offensive side, it's more on the I want to offer product into a closed wall community. So here's a basic anatomy of a chip. Nothing new here. Processor, memory, EEPROM. Interesting. There's a lot of this goes really deep, and we're not going to get into all of it today. But some cute things they've done is they put fuses on the board to ensure that if somebody's trying to reverse engineer it, they can't just hook onto the JTAG, which is basically a debug port, and pull off the firmware too easy. In the old days, they did. But if you mill the chip down and polish it and then scan it, this is what you end up having to look at. So from the attacker's toolbox, like the software world, you know, you've got the classic buffer overflow, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, off-by-one errors, the same kind of attacks, but for hardware within the hardware world. And, you know, this requires EE background sometimes. Sometimes it just requires a insatiable curiosity for hardware, like the guy Oliver who did a lot of the chip hacking back in the satellite days. He just loved this stuff, so he just kept hacking on it, and he was the chief pirate for a long time, to the point where he was getting paid £250,000 just to release the next break on Digital's system. He'd fly into London, meet with a bunch of basically like street vendors that wanted to sell pay TV cards, and he would say, look, it's $250,000, and you guys can go ahead and take the blueprint and run with it. So he didn't have really a formal education in it, but he learned how to do it. He made a lot of money. Now he's living in Uruguay. So we'll get into component sniffing later. So much like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with white box or black box analysis in the software review world, but it's the same as, you can kind of liken the two. Black box testing would be similar to the non-invasive chip hacking, where you're not actually destroying the chip itself. You're interfacing with it either via side channel attacks or over a bus or a JTAG port or a serial header that's been removed. But the board should still be functioning when you're done with it. So non-invasive hacking. And then invasive hacking is when you're actually putting the chip into sulfuric acid, etc., and the chip's never going to come back to life. But that would be kind of like the white box review, where you're actually looking at the chip, figuring out how the designers laid it out and where to attack it specifically. So there's a glitching attack both on the power and the clock, and basically imagine just trying to abuse the functionality of the chip. So it does things like spit out its firmware or spit out its keys because you over-revved or you under-revved the clock. You made it go plus 6 volts and then down to like negative something, and it's just like, what are you doing? I don't understand, and it just throws up on you. Kind of like fuzz testing in a way. And there's a bunch of power analysis. They've done amazing things that we'll get into a bit later on power analysis and timing attacks, to where they can actually monitor the power supply of the device and figure out what key it generated, size, etc. I think that's just mind-boggling, way above my pay grade stuff. But if you're interested in this, it's fascinating read. So here's a JTAG interface, good for, again, removing firmware to reverse engineer and find vulnerabilities, or key extraction, or just maybe reflashing the board with your own stuff. You remember like the OpenWRT product or software project. Oftentimes, if it's a board that don't have a lot of time on, you end up having to flash the board over the JTAG port with their firmware. And you'll be happy to know, like, silly things like default passwords exist on these embedded devices, static passwords that never change, burned into EEPROM. Things that you thought were dead and gone from years ago have now resurfaced and are alive and well, and they're really rookie security mistakes. Here's a picture of a blown JTAG fuse. As you can see on the top right hand corner, you can see that the circuit's not connected. That's what it looks like when a fuse is blown, and then on the bottom right it's connected. So with the fib, one of the attacks you can do is you can load this chip up in the fib, and you can re-establish that circuit with the fib edit. So now the JTAG's reattached, and you can dump the firmware or whatever you're after. The other thing you can do is, say that the embedded device has a bootloader. Sometimes the bootloader is not authenticated, so you can go ahead and feed it bits, whatever you want, to get it to boot it. Not necessarily the secure by design, by default method. And now moving on to more interesting things. The embedded world's good. It's fun stuff. You can get into that hacking. Probably, if you want the equipment, you're going to run anywhere from maybe $1,000 to $5,000 for a rig. And you can take a lot of the classes that they have here, or you can talk to Dimitri about taking amazing hardware hacking classes, and I recommend you do that. You might see me in there. Who knows? Invasive chip hacking. This is where we're actually decapping the chip and putting it into the SIM and the fib and the reactive ion beam etcher, depending on what we need. First step of it is to open the package, which means using either a mechanical or a chemical process. We'll have a video of that a bit later. Then we examine the chip under a microscope to try to understand how it works. And then we spend more time actually trying to conduct the attack offline, basically once we've imaged the chip and understand where all its components are and how to go about attacking it. And then we come back to the fib to do those edits. Stop me if you got any questions at all. All right, so on the right-hand side, you can see that's actually a fib edit there. They've milled it down a bit, top right corner. So you're hacking at the nanometer level, which is pretty amazing. And for me, I see it as rocket science. And when the guys are working away in the lab, I'm just like, I'm not worthy. Pretty amazing stuff. It's a kid in a candy factory when you see it all done. And to kind of, it's really cool too as software engineers to understand that our software, it gets compiled down to, in essence, just a stream of ones and zeros that then we trust to run on this hardware. And then you see somebody breaking the security module of that chip that you relied on to generate AES 256 keys. You're like, wait, no. Did you just got the AES key that I've been storing there for years? That's not good. Silly things like that. Things that I personally as a software dev never thought were possible. There was one case study where there was a crypto processor that was being used, an IBM 8507 or something like that, and they would have to replace them every so often. And these devices were then thrown into a garbage can. This guy paid the cleaner to, next time you're taking out the trash, please give me that crypto processor. And so the guy did, and what he was able to do, because these old days, he was able to do a memory remnants attack. The master key for the entire bank was burned into the memory, and he was able to dump that and get the key and decrypt all the bank's transactions. So it's fun stuff. The crypto processors are amazing. They're in ways they have thermite loads on them. So if you open the casing, it has a shape blast that blows apart the chip on the later ones. I don't know about you, but that's like hacker folklore, where somebody grabs your hard disk and just obliterates. We all want that, right? Well, they've got it in the banking industry. Okay, so decap the chip. You can do rear side probing attacks, which means that you just flip the board over or the chip over, and you can use UV to go through the layers, and you're not actually having to mill at the chip, etc. For some reason, it's physics, I don't get it, but you can look through the chip 4 layers or 7 layers and get the whole readout of the board. Okay, here's our reactive ion etcher. That thing has we have this really cool video of it, but I wasn't able to get it because the network was bad. Okay, so here's our chemical bath. We've got a video coming up. Basically, the chip is in a package, and to get at the chip, you need to remove the package so you can get at the actual device itself and start the polishing process. So let's see if this works. I sped it up so you guys don't have to stare at it for too long. It usually takes a bit more time than this, and you definitely don't want to have this isn't a fume hood, so when the process is doing its thing, you're not inhaling toxic gases. And you should have seen the insurance company when we asked for the insurance policy for this. It was a funny conversation. They're like, now what do you guys do again? It's like a scene out of Breaking Bad or whatnot. So that's decapping a chip for later processing in the fib and moving over to the probing station. I'm sure in 5 to 10 years, if you're a security shop, you're going to have all of this kit with the embedded systems going the way they are, and security being pushed farther and farther down in the into the chip. For example, Intel introduced another ring to the x86 architecture, a -1 for their trusted computing platform. I don't know. Do you guys know you have an entire software suite running in ring -1? They haven't made an edit to the Intel chip architecture in decades. This is the first time. So now we examine the chip. Oftentimes you're looking for repeating patterns, looking for the core, looking for EEPROM. Sometimes if they didn't encrypt the EEPROM, you can actually visually read it out with a microscope, the ones and zeros. Most EEPROMs are encrypted. Communication paths in between the devices. They used to be on unencrypted buses, but now they encrypt the bus because of the fib edits, etc. Being able to actively read data off the bus of the chip when it's running. That's pretty amazing. But as we move on in time, we're not hacking like the old days of pay TV. We've gone from 134 nanometer traces down to much smaller in the 90 range, and the chips are laid out not necessarily by hand anymore. They're laid out by machines, which makes them very hard to follow and understand, because it's a very complex problem, and a lot of the labs like us are working on that today to figure out how to remedy that problem. It's going to take a lot of software, and 5 minutes, yeah, I got it. A lot of software and hard work. So I got about 5 minutes here. I'm going to try to speed through this. This work here was done by Dimitri, who's an amazing guy out of Berlin. If you get a chance to talk to him, tell him I said hi. He's loves chip hacking. So here we go. He's done some infrared photo work on chips, and this is actually what a chip looks like under infrared light with a microscope doing its thing. I think that's pretty cool. He's loading data onto a bus, analyzing it, and then eventually he'll be using this to extract an AES key. So when you see the FIPS 140 rating or a common criteria rating, don't always believe it unless you have smart people like Dimitri giving a whack at it, or us. And you can see here's the activity on the chip. It's like hacking the matrix, but in the physical world. That bright spot on the right hand side, that is actually the AES engine. So you look at these, you talked about the billion gate problem. Maybe using this technique, you can kind of isolate the area of the chip that you want to go look at, because you can see almost in a sense its heat signature, or to go explore. Good stuff. Okay, the probing station, the fib. The fib's really used to do edits and set up pads, basically going through metal layers 1 or through 7, depending what you're after. Usually you're after a data bus or a clock line. You mill a hole, and in this case they have a security mesh. This image was taken by Oliver, the master hacker from the pay TV days, and as you can see where that cross is where he's done a fib edit. He's milled between the security mesh, and the security mesh, basically if you breach the security mesh, the chip is supposed to zero its keys and destroy itself. But if you have a fib, you can go in between those very small traces and make a drill hole down to the lower data bus and start to extract data, and that's what he did in this situation. That's what you would use a fib for. And on the left-hand side, you can see how the chip has a bit of a copper that's been exposed, and that's where the foundry had made a mistake, or the designer of the chip, and didn't actually extend the security mesh over the entire chip. So you can see that they exposed the power line. So now you can do some glitching attacks. So nothing's perfect, just like in software. Okay. 2 minutes, guys. You're almost done. Thanks for bearing with me. All right, here's a nice video for you of us zooming around a chip. The difference with this video is that we've been able to do some pretty high resolution imagery, and it's down to we can go down to 14 nanometers. And when we first started the hardware lab, we were doing 134 nanometers. So we've come quite a long ways. And go. So the first stop on the tour is flash memory. They're zooming in. This looks much better on my screen, by the way. And then now we've looking at some fake flakes of glass that ended up on the chip. There you can barely see it, but there's kind of like a shiny dot like the North Star. That's fill metal. And then the chip manufacturer here has gone ahead and left us a nice note that says reproduction of this area is prohibited, so that will keep us out of it for sure. Here we get to the billion gate problem. Once it zooms in, you can start to see the complexity and how these aren't hand laid out anymore. They're laid out by a computer, and it's hard to tell which way is up. And some of these circuits, they're not even real circuits. They just put them in there to confuse you, kind of like a paper tiger. And then the next stop is the power conduit of the chip. Exciting. All right, so you can see this is hacking into the 21st and a half century. And we'll move on from there. So designing for security, some of the things you want to keep in mind is, if you're a chip designer, don't make your don't label your components. Get rid of your exposed debugging interfaces. Encrypt your memory. Definitely have third party look at your tamper mechanisms. Don't leave a serial console on your board and just like shave off the header and hope nobody knows it's the RS-232 port. Don't put backdoors in your products. Like some people like to put backdoors in their embedded systems for maintenance reasons. Don't do that, because we will find them. You dump the firmware, you will find it. You just run strings against the firmware and you find, oh wow, look, there's the password, username, pass. And then they use that same password across all devices, which now you've got 14 million of them out in the real world, and patching hardware is not as easy as patching software and costs tons of money. So best practices, I think best practices is go to lots of training for this, and hopefully the hardware world will get in front of the right people to get them encouraged to talk to us, because right now it's kind of like the old days of security where people said the hackers weren't real, and that's the folklore of like unicorns and whatnot. Let me tell you, back 19 years ago, everybody thought hackers weren't real, and now look at them. You look at the TV and we're like front line center. Okay, so that's it, guys. You made it. Any questions? I'm a little jet lagged, so hopefully I didn't kill you with boredom.
Questions? Anyone?
Yeah.
So thank you. I agree completely with your statements of the early part of the presentation about securing supply chain and trusting your suppliers. But when you work for an international company and producing products for parts all over the world, and you have large organizations in all countries all over the world, how do you suggest dealing with that in a acceptable way when a lot of those people are saying produce here because it's cheaper, when that same country is one that's not really well trusted by the rest of the world? Any ideas on that? You understand the problem, right?
Yeah, I get it. I think the most clever one I've seen so far is what BT did, and they said, okay, so instead of paying $100 for that kit from like Cisco, we're going to pay $10 from Huawei, and we're going to take that $90 and we're going to invest it back into security audits for that supply chain. And to their credit, they found lots of vulnerabilities in those products, and they were when they handed them back over to Huawei, they were very quick to fix them. So I don't know, that could be one strategy. But you're right. When you're in a large international organization, what do you do? That's a good question. Yeah, I don't think there's an easy one for that. Yeah, that's a hard one. I wish there was an easy answer. Abacus. Move back to the abacus. Anything else?
When we select a software vendor, we ask for different set of controls and other things which they can demonstrate to get the product as a self-assurance. But for the screening or the partner screening of the hardware, what type of, is there any specific standards or other things came up right now to give them a comfort to the prospective customer that this, because you talked about Lenovo, because once fail, it has to get out from the system. So is there any set of standards which partner, before when the partner screening is on for hardware, they can give the satisfaction to the customer that their security is up to the level and will not be compromised along with the bundle with the software layer?
So let me repeat the question. So you're asking what kind of assurances can a company give to their clients about what kind of due diligence they've done on their part to ensure that their supply chain hasn't been breached. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. To give the satisfaction that the hardware security is okay and will not be fudged around the way you described it. Mm-hmm. Is there any standards and other thing or thing which gives at the moment at present in the ecosystem?
It depends on what country you live in, I guess, is one way, because one person's superhero is another person's terrorist, right? But like say in the States, there's the trusted foundry program set up by the DoD, and that foundry that program is chip makers that are only basically complying with certain standards. They're oftentimes domestic. So if you're developing some a weapon of actual weapon, and it requires chips, you as a company are required to use this Trusted Foundry program according to the U.S. government. And so in that sense, you're giving some kind of attestation to your end client that, look, we've only used pre-approved chips in our product, and that's the part that we've done. There's also FIPS 140 compliance. There's common criteria. There's a lot of debate about whether or not those programs are good or not, but I guess it's at least a step in the right direction. Yeah. And I think also partnering with your local whoever works in your foreign intelligence office, et cetera, and ask them like, hey, what do you think about this vendor? Because they seem to know a lot more than we think they do. They often, they got really good intel. Scary things, anyways. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was inferring that maybe there'd be a similar program in the country that you live in. So if you live in, say, the UAE, that they have a similar Trusted Foundry program. But yeah, but you're right. They do have you're certainly not going to get a mill-grade chip shipped to you in Iran. That's not going to happen. But I got to imagine there's something out there. Yeah. Next question. Sure.
So you were talking about lack of trust in supply chain. Now, there's some countries like in the US, they've gone after Huawei and ZTE and tried to have sanctions against them, against using Huawei and ZTE products in the telecom sector in the US. Similarly, there are similar rules in Australia as well. In India, we've requested Huawei to share source code, and there's a lab in IISc in Bangalore where they've been studying source code. Except, I'm not sure targeting specific companies and specific countries makes any sense, because these, while some of the vulnerabilities are deliberate, others are not.
That's true.
So for military grade stuff, you can have a Trusted Foundry, system. What do you do for something like, the networking infrastructure that your telecom companies use?
Mm-hmm.
How do you ensure that isn't vulnerable? What kind of programs can a government, roll out to try to improve the security in that area?
It's a good question. That's why you're all here. You won't be replaced by robots. Let's put it that way. So it's a great question. It's a difficult problem to solve, and that's the slide. Obviously, hardware security is not new, but these are the questions that we need to all be contemplating and figuring out programs and approaches to help secure the rest of the supply the system. We can't just be writing secure code that's been sitting on chips that's been backdoored at the factory. Good stuff. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Joshua.
you.
Thanks a lot.